In this video, we want to talk to you about how you might start adding relationships between various endpoints on a provider map in the BitScoop API Toolbox. So when we're working with relational databases, we can encode relationships in a database by way of primary keys and foreign keys. An ORM tool, or an object relational mapping tool, is a convenient component of any application programming language, or at least most application programming languages, that interprets these relationships and subsequently streamlines the data retrieval aspect of an application. But what do we have available for APIs? A lot of APIs don't specify the relationships between data available at different endpoints. We have a few libraries that we can use that are out in the wild, but a lot of these libraries depend on the data format that comes back, so maybe they don't work in your particular application. With the BitScoop API Toolbox, we're interested in doing what we can to start to describe relationships between data, especially if those relationships aren't there, and taking steps to standardize the format of the data we get back. Doing this essentially lets us perhaps take advantage of these libraries that we wouldn't otherwise be able to use. And most importantly, it lets us efficiently query the data from a data provider, which ultimately results in you saving usage on your API key wherever possible. So let's go ahead and dive right into our example here, where we establish a relationship between a post and a user. Keep in mind that this video is going to be building off of an example that we've already presented in the context of data modeling. So if you haven't watched that video already, you might be interested in taking a look at it just so you're on the same page as we are right now. So if we hop into the source code of this particular data provider map, and we open up the source code view, you can see that the only noticeable difference between this and our previous example is this population directive, which we're going to cover in a second, and this new field user. So the user field right here describes the relationship between posts and users. So in this sample data provider, the relationship is essentially described as a single post has a single user ID. And what that means is that a user might have written multiple posts, but every post has a single author. So how we code that relationship right here, we basically add the field user. Really, we can call it whatever we want, but user makes sense. We say that the type of this field is related, so it's a related field. The relationship here references the user's endpoint, and this user's right here maps to this user's right here, so it just references the user endpoint. And then we're passing forward a reverse. We're going to cover what a reverse means in the next slide, but just so you get a general idea right here, essentially what this is saying is we're passing forward the identifier evaluated based on the model's user ID forward to the user's endpoint. And so if you recall, essentially when we have an identifier and we're using that to call a particular endpoint, that's what indicates to the BitScoop API Toolbox that we're trying to select a single item as opposed to the group of items. So if we didn't have this reverse, the call would still work, but what essentially happen is we would get a list of all of our users in our system related to every single post we request, and that doesn't encapsulate the relationship properly. So we're just passing forward that identifier there to say we have a single user related to a single post. This population directive is basically included to say, do the hydration. So what happens when you make this call is that this user field isn't necessarily included. We just assume that you don't want to include it because it has implications for a lot of data coming back. So to indicate to us that you want to include that by default, you just say populate star. What the star does is it's just shorthand for crawling all the relationships. So you might have a relationship and a second hydration attached to the user's endpoint. And what that would do is populate the user on the post first, and then maybe data onto the user second. And it would do that in order and make sure everything was handled properly. So let's hop over to our other screen here and just make a couple calls to show you what's going on. So we're going to open this up. We're going to go to a single post instance. So we're going to request a post with the ID of 1 and see what we get. So you can see over on the data provider on the right hand side, this call to the BitScoop API Toolbox manifests in 2 calls to the data provider, as you might expect. So we make a single call to the /post/1. This particular post has a user ID of 1, you can see right here. And what that means is based on a relationship that it should correlate to user, the user here, with an ID of 1. So you can see we have a call to /post/1 and another call to /user/1. The result from this call /user/1 to the data provider, we wait for that to come back, we attach it to the result of /post/1, and then we return you the net result right here. So that is what you might expect if you take another look at the user field that we established. So let's take a look at what happens when we request all of our posts, because this has some implications for just another feature that we include to make sure that we're respecting the calls that you make to your data provider and your API keys that you're using. So we're going to clear this out and just restart this so it's clear what's going on. We're going to send a request to all the posts. And you can see within the result of this data, this user with an ID of 1 authored more than one post. So if you're concerned about the traffic that's going out to a data provider, as you should be just aware of the fact that we only make a request to a single user in the context of a hydration once per call. So if we're making a call to /posts, essentially what's going to manifest over the data provider right here is a single call to /user/1. And we just reuse that data that we get back here for every hydration where that data is pertinent. So we have like 1, 2, 3, something, about 10 posts maybe written by Leanne Graham, user ID 1. And we don't send 10 requests to /user/1. So let's touch really quickly on the reverse, just so you can have a visual representation of what's going on here. Notice that this isn't quite exactly the same thing. We also included some parameters in this particular reverse, just to show an additional feature. But what you can see over in the top right is the initial call that we made to a single post. So provider API, bitscoop.com, the provider map ID /post/1 with a query parameter foo equals barb. That manifests based on our provider map into a call to our data provider at localhost 5858 /post/1. And we get the result back, which has a user ID of say 5. And then based on our reverse specification, we're passing forward the identifier model.userid, so that would be 5, forward to the endpoint users. And what that manifests in is a call to localhost 5858 /users/5. Also notice that we're taking the parameter foo that we have in the initial request, and we're passing that forward to the request to users as well. So as you trace through this data here, everything's color-coded, so you can take a look at the slide and reference it to make that a little bit more clear, hopefully. So that wraps up what we had in store for how you would go about adding data relationships in a particular provider map. As always, I want to point you to the examples that we have hosted on GitHub if you're looking for some examples as you create your own data provider. Aside from that, if you run into any trouble or have any problems as you're going through this process, please feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to help. Thanks so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon in some future videos.